All right, joining me once again here on the Matthew Filipowicz Show is my good buddy Tim Karr. Tim is the campaign director for Free Press, which you can find at freepress.net. You can also follow him on Twitter at Tim Karr. Tim, thank you so much for being on the show again.
Hi, Matt.
So, Tim, buddy, last time you were on the show, we talked about how the FCC chair, Tom Wheeler, had proposed rules that would, in fact, destroy net neutrality and kill the internet as we know it. I guess my first question to you is, how has the public responded to the FCC, Tom Wheeler's chairman's proposal to kill net neutrality?
Well, I think it's fair to say that this has been a bad couple of months for Chairman Wheeler. He did come out with that proposal earlier this year, and he kind of couched it as being a plan to save the open internet. But what his proposal actually does is it lets internet service providers discriminate in favor of some traffic and in favor of big companies that pay for extra money, and then to slow down the rest of the internet by doing so. So it's not been a good month for him because the public overwhelmingly did not buy his argument that this is something that would help the open internet. In fact, there have been this year more than 4 million actions that have been taken in Washington, whether it's writing the White House, writing your member of Congress, or contacting the FCC directly. And his office has been overwhelmed. They opened up a comment docket at the FCC, which is an online web function that allowed people to go there and put their comments in, and there were so many comments in advance of the first deadline for that on July 10th that the website crashed. The FCC, which stands for the Federal Communications Commission, couldn't handle the communications, and so millions of people have taken action. It's the largest response to any rulemaking at the FCC. It's bigger now than the public response to Janet Jackson's 2004 Nipplegate, which generated a lot of angry letters.
Right.
And net neutrality is bigger than that.
Well, it's great that, again, it's always nice to see when the internet is threatened, how much people respond. But yeah, what's so crazy is again, I remember seeing a report that it's somewhere like close to 99% of all the responders on the FCC have been, no, this rule change is a bad idea. You can't do this. Don't do this. I don't even know who are the 0.1% that are yes, please change the internet like this. Who's actually taking the time to file something that actually is in support of Wheeler's new rule?
Well, you're right. The Sunlight Foundation, which does a lot of work on researching data, looked at these comments. They found that 99% were in support of net neutrality. I mean, there's no issue in the history of FCC that has such a large consensus of support, and yet, we're still facing the very real prospect that this agency will reject what the 99% is asking for, and go along with the powerful phone and cable lobby. And so that 1% that you are talking about is really the 1% that is working for the interests of the phone and cable lobby. Companies like Comcast and Verizon and AT&T, and they have a lobbying group called the National Cable and Telecommunications Association. They spread a lot of money around Washington. Some of that money goes to members of Congress in the form of campaign contributions. Some of that money goes to hire lobbyists. A lot of that money also goes to PR groups and think tanks who take this money and then they write comments in support of big phone and big cable and against net neutrality. So that 1%, it'd be kind of fun to do an analysis of that 1%, and you would probably find, in most cases, there's some form of money from industry behind the people who have been commenting against net neutrality.
Yeah, what's interesting though, this is actually one of those instances where it's a small group of 1%ers against another group of 1%ers and the rest of us, because there are a lot of tech companies who are against the killing of net neutrality as well. A lot of Silicon Valley doesn't want to see net neutrality destroyed, and so you have this battle of the telecom 1%ers versus a lot of Silicon Valley 1%ers.
Yeah, there's been that divide. It really, this really boils down to who controls the future of communications. I mean, we're at a time, we have we have Comcast that is trying to take over Time Warner Cable. Comcast earlier took over NBC Universal. Everything about the way we communicate, everything about the media is converging with the internet, and whoever controls the internet controls the future of communications. And if you've studied the history of our government and democracy, you find that if you actually control communications, you often control who gets elected and what issues get voted on and what issues get rejected. And so we have a situation right now where we're battling for the future of communications. The phone and the cable lobby are very interested in becoming the gatekeepers to all information that goes across the internet, and then the rest of us does include a lot of Silicon Valley companies, a lot of tech companies who are like social media networks that really rely on a network of users for value. Google made it because so many of us use Google, and Facebook is successful because so many of us use Facebook. And those companies want to continue to allow us to get access to all of that information, so they do support net neutrality.